Welcome to this week's episode of Saulcast. Today we're talking about Season 6, Episode 8, titled Point and Shoot.
I thought it was called Better Call Lyle.
No, it's Better Dial Lyle.
Oh, yeah.
So we're talking about Better Call Saul. This is Saulcast. And we did our instant take earlier in the week, but this is our full recap and analysis. I'm Gil, here with my brother Adam.
Hello.
And I don't know if you all saw the reception to our instant take, but people didn't like some of what we had to say, so we felt like we had to go on the run and hide out in this remote location.
We're on the lam.
That's right. Kind of like in Avengers Age of Ultron. At one point, they're like, we can't handle this. And so they go hide out on a farm.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, so we're doing the same thing.
And I know what you internet sleuths are thinking. Well, I'll just use the location of the stars in the sky to geographically pinpoint their exact location.
The stars are so beautiful in New Mexico. I think
told it. Come on.
I think I'll go over there and take a closer look.
Yeah. But anyway, you're never going to find us, so don't even
try.
Even try it, yeah.
So we're going to jump into it now. One interesting thing to note is that we usually do this podcast storyline by storyline. All the Jimmy and Kim stuff, then all the Mike and Gus stuff. But the storylines have fully collided at this point. So really, we're just going to go left to right chronologically through the episode. And we start with another purely visual cold open where we see the beach, we see Howard's shoes, and we slowly pan out to see his car.
And that was, for me, how I knew for sure Howard was dead.
Yeah, that's what sealed the deal for you.
Yeah.
This was like, I think the end of Season 3, Breaking Bad, where Jesse shoots Gale.
Yep. Yeah.
And the camera's swooping around the pistol, so it kind of looked like his gun moved a little. So people are like, he didn't shoot Gale. He quickly moved his gun at the last second.
Yeah. Okay, so he just shot the air next to him for no reason.
I think every death since then on both shows has been extremely unambiguous. Like Howard not only gets shot in the head, nearly point blank, smack his head on the table first, before he falls to the ground.
That was brutal.
Like he's definitely dead.
And this is kind of the most they've ever shown someone's lifeless corpse. Right?
Yeah.
And they like really sold it.
Yeah, you mentioned that a few times, but I've never seen even on the Insider podcast, I think Kelly Dixon, who's sort of the co-host, she commented a few times about how much they sold it with the corpses. Yeah. The slack jaw. And there is acting in that. Like that actually is Patrick Fabian on the ground. Mm-hmm. And every time you see him, it's disturbing and horrifying.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but when they dropped him in the grave, that was not a dummy. That was a stunt double.
I believe you're right.
Yeah.
I think that's right.
I think I'd be a good stunt double at playing a corpse.
Yeah.
I can hold my breath for a long time. And I think I'd be really good at just like relaxing all my muscles and being a ragdoll.
What's the longest you've held your breath?
3 minutes.
Oh, okay. I was going to say I did it for 2 minutes at the YMCA pool when I was a kid.
That's impressive, too.
But anyway, the purely visual cold open, like I said before, it does one of the things Better Call Saul does best, which is it very strongly portrays an emotion. Like you feel awful watching this. Especially with the slow reveal, because you kind of understand what's going on. Mm-hmm. You see the shoe, but if you're not...
Yeah, but at first you could think, okay, so this is just how they got rid of his body. They dumped it in the water.
Right, and then maybe you start to piece it together. As it gets closer to the car, you see the wallet and ring, and then you realize, okay, they set it up to look like he just walked into the water.
It's horrific how unjust that is.
Yeah.
For someone who... He built a reputation legitimately.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of the only characters on this show who legitimately built a reputation.
Right.
Who did, I don't know if you could say the right thing all the time because he was a lawyer.
Yeah,
and they have a certain reputation. But he worked within the confines of the law. He worked hard. And it's just so unfair. It feels really unfair.
I will say I have friends who are lawyers, and some of them do the right thing all the time. So that was not us insulting all lawyers.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
For those lawyers who are watching who want to sue us for defamation.
Yeah, exactly. But the scene, it makes you feel something, and like we already alluded to, it tells you something because it resolves how are they going to cover up Howard's death. We immediately understand. A couple of other things I want to point out in this opening, but you hear the music on the radio.
Yeah.
And that immediately at least made me think of when Jimmy took his car.
Yeah, that was a really nice kind of tie-in.
Yeah.
because I didn't think we'd have any reason to hear that again or to even be reminded of like Howard's musical listening habits. And it also kind of tells you, like, one thing you could potentially criticize Howard for throughout the series was he's a phony. Like, he's always like acting very formal, very professional. But even in his personal free time, he's listening to classical music. It seems like to a large extent that's just the kind of person he was. And even though he's somewhat estranged from his wife, we saw the way he talks to her is also pretty... He's someone who didn't have that great a separation, I think, between his personal and his professional life. And that's a strong theme we've seen in the show, but it can manifest in many different ways. And I think hearing that music was a nice tie-in to a detail we picked up on earlier in the season.
It makes you remember him as a person. It also, for me, it made me think of, again, Jimmy and his car. So it also brings to mind, wow, all of this because of this stupid scheme that Jimmy and Kim were pulling. And then, of course...
Right, imagine if he wasn't able to come up with a way to get the car back in the parking lot, or in a parking space that would look right to Howard.
Right, Howard would have known something was up immediately.
He could have saved his life.
Yeah, the jig could have been up.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we finish with the Namaste license plate, which we just have so many memories of that license plate. So it felt like the right way to kind of conclude this character.
Right. It was both a kind of a nice memorial for him, and also it was like look at what happened. Look at what they did to him.
Right. Yeah. Though having said that, I definitely don't think it's the last we're going to hear about Howard. I personally think that if they're going to go the route of redemption, Howard has to be a part of that. Chuck has to be a part of that. Gene has to somehow metaphorically unbury this.
Right.
And tell somebody, somehow clear up his reputation.
Yes.
Because that's part of what feels so unjust about this, besides the fact that he's now dead, but the fact that his reputation is also tarnished.
Yes. How loud do you think that's going to sound?
That's pretty loud. So maybe we'll pause for a second.
Okay. That's the one problem with recording at night is that's when the bugs start talking.
All right, get the rifle at him.
Yeah. Speaking of a redemption arc for Gene, I hadn't thought about that too much until this past episode. But
yeah, should we listen to it?
Yeah, let's find out how bad it is.
Right.
A redemption arc for Gene is something that only came up recently. Like throughout our speculating about what's going to happen in this Gene timeline and how they're going to conclude the story, I didn't often hear anyone talk about redemption for Saul. In part because the things Saul has done to this point didn't seem really that bad. They're bad. He's done a lot of immoral things, but nothing that just a lot of them were really bad. But the point is, they didn't immediately make my mind jump to, I hope he redeems himself, or or at least I hope he can do right by the people he once wronged.
Right. I mean, let me just pause there for a second, because I think the thing people will immediately say is, you're forgetting he essentially killed his own brother, Chuck. But I think for that, Howard is a much more direct result of their actions. Chuck ended up taking his own life, and Jimmy definitely had a role in that. But ultimately, Jimmy can't take full responsibility for that. But when we thought of him resolving that issue, I don't think we thought redemption necessarily. We more thought him facing up to the reality that he was part of the cause. But now we start to think about, he went through that, chose to do something similar again. He's doing bad things. Suddenly now we think about redemption.
And in Chuck's case, all he did was kind of push a domino. Like, he changed the numbers on the thing, right? And stuck to that lie, and it caused a cascade of events that led to Chuck's suicide.
Right.
In Howard's case, first of all, Howard never even chose to die, so there was even less of a matter of choice involved. And also, he didn't just tell lies, but he told lies that ruined his reputation and caused him to die in a way that was really undeserving of him. Now, that's true of Chuck too, but at least Chuck was able to make choices along the way. Even while Chuck was being lied to and manipulated and wronged, he still at least kind of had a say in matters.
Right.
Howard had all of his agency taken away from him, both over his personal choices and his reputation. in either case, it's reprehensible, right?
Right.
But one emotionally hit me harder, which was what happened to Howard, because I haven't seen Howard pick on Saul the way Chuck did.
Right.
Chuck didn't deserve any of this. I feel like I don't need to keep saying that. Everyone knows that I don't think Chuck should have been gone through what he went through. But the point is, what happened to Howard seemed even more explicitly, emotionally hard-hitting to me. And that's when it first struck me that, one thing that I would like maybe to happen in the Gene timeline is for him to come clean and say,
Right.
Chuck's suicide was my fault in a way. Chuck never made that mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it was a tiny mistake, it mattered a lot to Chuck to be right. And it's up to Chuck what matters to him. And so
Right.
I want Gene to come out and say, I did that. I want him to come out and say, Howard didn't commit suicide. In fact, he was more determined than ever to turn things around and to overcome all the crap that I did to him.
Right.
I don't know if we're going to see that, but it's one potential outcome I hadn't thought about until just this past episode because of how hard the Howard thing hit me.
Right. I think just to put one final fine bow, I think, on what you're saying about Jimmy and Chuck and why that may have felt less unjust. Jimmy and Chuck feels like the two brothers were in a war for a long time, and one of them lost that battle. Whereas Howard, it felt like Jimmy and Kim just going hard at Howard. He wasn't even firing back, and he ended up a victim. So I think that's why maybe it hits that unjust button so much harder.
Right. I mean, it's not obvious that changing those numbers around and kind of gaslighting Chuck is somehow obviously more evil than systematically and consistently destroying your brother's career prospects because of your own personal hangups.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think let's go to the present.
And that's why he deserves to die.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. A joke, by the way.
Joke, yes,
right?
For those who... Oh, God.
Okay, we pick up right where we left off with a flickering candle, Howard's blood. Lalo calms Jimmy and Kim down and tells them... Well, he tells Jimmy that he wants him to drive over to a certain location. We know it's Gus's house. He tells him, ring the doorbell. I've got a gun for you in the glove compartment. So as soon as this person opens the door, shoot him. And keep shooting until the gun runs out, then take a picture. Jimmy quickly convinces Lalo to send Kim instead. The argument he makes is that if I show up at the door, it's very suspicious. I look like a threat. But Kim, she's a female. She's going to look distressed.
Ooh.
What was that?
How dare he? How dare he?
What, make this idea that Gus would be more willing to open the door for a female? Gotcha. He's going to think that she had like a car accident or something.
Yeah.
They'd be more willing to open the door. Kim begs no. Jimmy continues to make his case, and Lola just throws up his hands and said, fine, send her, whatever. Now, before Kim leaves, she's so out of it, Lola has to remind her to put her shoes on. And then he gives her 1 hour. Be back here. And he says, clock's ticking, Mrs. Goodman. So I think, first off, a lot of characters here saying things on the surface, but with a hidden purpose.
Yes.
Lalo is not expecting either of them to actually kill Gus. This is to create a distraction so he can get to the laundromat. Mm-hmm. And it works. Jimmy tells Lola to send Kim because she's the better option, but in reality, he just wants to get her out of the room.
Yeah.
Because he knows whoever stays behind is staying behind at gunpoint with Lalo. So it's sort of an act of self-sacrifice.
Right.
I mentioned on the Instant Take that there were a few LOL moments in the episode, and some people were like, how can you laugh at such a dark episode? But really, that was at Tribeca. People laughed at that moment because there is an alternate incorrect way to read the line, which is that Jimmy didn't want to go. So he says immediately, send her, which is exactly the sort of thing you would expect Saul Goodman to say if you only knew him from Breaking Bad. And now, of course, knowing there's a Jimmy McGill underneath the Saul Goodman mask, of course, that's the incorrect reading of the line.
He is very fiercely loyal to Kim.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what it shows.
And I think it didn't even occur to me to interpret it in the more cowardly way. Until I heard you mention that. But I can see in the context of a crowd, all it takes is one person to have that understanding and to chuckle, to suddenly get someone else to say, wait, how could that be funny? Oh, I get it. And then they laugh and it just spreads.
Yeah, I think Courtney, she was in the audience too, and she made that point on the Pete Peppers live stream.
Right.
And I think that's very true. Like, even if I'm at a stand-up comedy show, I'll laugh at way more stuff if I'm in an audience than if I were at home listening to it.
That's true.
It kind of augments everything.
That's why we encourage Saulcast listeners not to listen alone.
Yeah, you should all be
set up by the old jukebox.
right, like listening
The
to
home radio thing.
Yeah, well, like the Shadow, like the old-timey radio.
Where it's like this big box that everyone sits around.
Exactly.
With the dials on it.
So I love this scene. It was a great continuation from where we picked up, or where we left off in Plan and Execution. The acting from Bob and Ray, just a desperation from both of them. We already mentioned it shows that Jimmy's willing to make this sacrifice for her, makes her love feel very real. And of course, it's the last episode with Lalo, so you want to get some Lalo-isms. And I think we get a bunch.
We don't know for sure that he's dead.
If true, it could be, I mean, with the theme of body doubles all season. But you have Lalo's classic Lalo way of speaking, where he's discussing something very grave. You have to go kill this person, but it's all, drive safe, and then you get there and you shoot him. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I love when Lalo is saying things like that, because that's not who he is, but he knows that that's how humans are.
Right.
And he can do it too when he needs to.
Yeah, he can turn on just the smile, as we see in his last moments. But that smile and that cavalier attitude juxtaposed with this awful thing he just did and with this awful thing he's telling them to do, it's very Lalo.
He's one of the most charming villains I can think of just in media.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm definitely gonna miss him. Like,
Me too, yeah.
Just such a pleasant villain, which is a funny way of putting it.
The only problem... So there's so many characters on this show that I sometimes think, I would love a spinoff about them or a prequel.
Right.
It's just tough to say that about people who are so evil because I don't know. I like, if I'm going to watch a show about someone who's doing evil things, I would like it to be like Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul, where they feel more like an anti-hero.
Right.
It's just going to be hard to enjoy. Maybe, you know what, I'm sure they could pull it off.
Yeah, right.
But it's harder to picture a spinoff about like a Gus or a Lalo just because they're so rotten to the core.
Yeah, it's at least with Jimmy, you feel him slowly approaching that line, and you at least hope, even if he can't get full redemption, you at least hope that he can at some point somehow wrestle with what he's done. Yeah, I don't think I need to explain the difference of why is it easier to sympathize with Jimmy than it is with Lalo. Before Kim leaves, she keeps kind of saying, don't, and Jimmy sadly tells her, you gotta go. And it felt a little bit like a goodbye, like we may not see each other again.
Absolutely.
Lalo, after Kim leaves, Lalo interrogates Jimmy. He ties him up, tells him about the massacre at his home. He tells Jimmy that Ignacio Varga let the assassins in. And who did Ignacio introduce Lalo to? And he taps Jimmy on the head. Him, Jimmy did. And it takes Jimmy a second to realize who Ignacio is. He's like, wait a minute, Nacho? And he starts yelling, whatever Ignacio did, he did alone. It wasn't me. It was Ignacio.
Yeah. So, except he got cut off, right? At the last
right, he mumbled the Ignacio was through the gag. So I think I remind people of this every episode. Cliff notes, in Breaking Bad, Walter and Jesse kidnapped Saul. And he thinks, wait, did Lalo send you? And he shouts out, it wasn't me, it was Ignacio.
Yeah.
So we finally have a full understanding of what that means. So there's a couple of weird questions about that scene. One, it's become pretty clear that Lalo is not going to survive this series. Of course, now we know he didn't, but up until now we've been thinking, why would Saul shout that about someone who's dead?
Yeah.
The other weird question is, he met Nacho as Nacho. That's how he's always referred to him. Why is he calling him Ignacio? We get the answers to both those questions this episode. Why would he think Lalo sent them even if he's dead? Well, at the end of this episode, Mike assures Jimmy that Lalo's not coming back.
Yeah.
That's the second time he's done this. And Lalo did come back. So Jimmy is always going to be haunted by that, and the specter of Lalo will always haunt Jimmy.
Lalo, the somewhat friendly ghost.
Yeah, exactly, when he wants to be.
Yeah.
And why would he call Nacho Ignacio? Because that's what Lalo called him. So, of course, he's going to shout out the name that will be recognizable to Lalo.
And why would Lalo call him Ignacio?
Because I guess that's how he knew him.
Because that's his name.
That's his name. There you go. Pretty masterful, I have to say. In terms of a prequel, because they had to thread such a fine line of, okay, we need to kill Lalo in a way where Jimmy might think he's still alive, and he's blaming Nacho for something, and they pulled it off. So I just think it's pretty impressive.
That was a really tough thing to do. Tough writing challenge, and they executed.
Not only did they pull it off, but how are they going to explain this to the audience?
Yeah.
Like, at what point does Jimmy sit down and say, remember when I yelled in Breaking Bad?
Yeah.
I mean, they found a way to do it. So I just got to say hats off to all the writers. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So Lalo tells Jimmy, I'm going to come back, and then you're going to tell me the whole story. So Lalo leaves. Jimmy starts struggling against his restraints, but only manages to fall to the ground where he's eye to eye with Howard's corpse.
Yeah. And I was pretty confident in Lalo's restraints there. I was a little bit like, okay, you really shouldn't leave your hostage behind like that. There's a good chance they'll get out. But those zip ties look pretty damn tight.
They did. And the nice thing is, even if Jimmy gets out,
Doesn't matter.
Not much he can do. He doesn't know where Lalo went. He has no idea. And I think this scene just goes further in ensuring that this experience will be as traumatic and transformative as possible.
Mm-hmm.
He now has to just lay there until help comes and stare at Howard's corpse.
God.
And remember that he's still dealing with the trauma post-desert.
So it wasn't that long ago.
It wasn't. So he's been in this rattled state, and to now experience this, it's very easy to see how he can walk away from this a totally different person.
Yeah.
And we're going to come back to that at the end of the episode. So we see Kim on the road, where anytime Kim's driving, it's bad news.
Every drive, Kim is going to face some kind of major moral dilemma.
Yeah, and she does here. So some cops pull up right next to her, and there's the moment. Does she talk to the cops or not? Before she left, Jimmy said, no cops, and she doesn't say anything. So she keeps driving towards Gus's house. David Porter, that's the person who does he's the composer, does all the music for Better Call Saul. A lot of great score this episode, and right here, it's super unsettling and intense. Kim gets to Gus's house, takes Lalo's gun out of the glove compartment, and walks toward the door.
Okay.
Now, this reminded me a lot of Walter in Breaking Bad when he pulls out a gun, walks toward Gus's house.
Mm-hmm.
And listening to the Insider podcast, it sounds like they did try to mimic exactly the same camera angle. Is you get a big overhead shot of her walking, just like we did with Walter White. So I half expected her to get a call from Mike, go home, Kim, but that didn't happen.
What do you think is the point of drawing that parallel? Is it just because it's interesting? Or is there any kind of broader reason thematically to do that?
To be honest, I think if you're just trying to draw a parallel, that's almost enough. But is there further thematic meaning to it? I don't know. Let me think about it. We'll come back to it.
Yeah. We probably won't, though.
Yeah, probably. Well, I'll just cut this out if I can't think of a good explanation. Adam, you mentioned, well, I'll say one thing. It does make me think of one thing, which is that Breaking Bad felt like a pretty specific journey of really zooming in on Walter White. It's him going down Bad Choice Road. I've often thought about the thematic difference between Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, and I think one of the differences is that Better Call Saul sort of shows you the journey Walter went down, but blows it up a little and says, who else would walk that path? Why would they do it? What pulls them
like
down?
That.
Right? Hey, so literally now we're seeing Kim is taking the exact same steps as Walter, but she got there in a very different way.
It was in that moment that Kim truly became Heisenberg.
Look at that. I did it, by the way. Isn't that great?
Yeah.
I found a way to make it work.
Now you can leave in the stuff about me saying we're not going to do it, so they can see how lazy we are.
Now, after we watched the episode on Monday, you mentioned, I think even while we were watching it, you commented, this feels like a horror movie.
Yeah.
So what made you say that?
So you have these kind of really angular, curvy-looking trees, like, and their shadows overhanging. You have this incredible score in the background that's just really haunting. Everything is dark, but there's just enough light to see what's going on. And I felt like the camera was doing an interesting thing where it was like zooming out sort of, but with a strange kind of lens. And it just gave it this surreal, dark, horror suspense kind of vibe. Especially
the shot of Kim standing at the door, wide angle in the darkness. And you mentioned the score, but even to get more specific, a lot of high-pitched stringed instruments, the kind of music you would hear in a horror movie.
Yeah.
So it definitely gives that vibe.
And there was a jack-o'-lantern on the porch. I don't know if you noticed.
I don't know if you caught that in the UFO that flew overhead.
Yeah.
But she rings the doorbell, holds up a gun, and then gets grabbed and thrown into the room surrounded by Mike's men.
Think how freaking scary that must have been for her.
Yeah, you think you're going to get shot any second at that point. Kim's in a panic. She tries to explain what's going on. She says that Lalo sent her, and Mike asks, to do what exactly? And she says, to shoot him. And she points at who I assume is Gus's body double.
Yeah. The one person who fits the description that Lalo gave.
Right. Looks like a librarian. Mike gets to work, but first, Kim shouts, you said you were watching us. Where were you? She's not happy with Mike. No. And I think that will only help to make Mike feel guilty at the end of this episode.
Right.
When he's looking down at Howard's corpse.
I think the resurrected soul of Lalo is buzzing around us right now.
Yeah,
one side effect of the great outdoors.
Of being outside. Special Outdoors Edition has some downsides. I love that line from Kim.
And for those listening to the audio, what I meant is there's a fly.
Oh, yeah, it's true, yeah. So Kim also shouts out, who are you people?
Yeah.
And I kind of love that line because we're so used to Mike.
I know, yeah.
Yeah, all these people, and this is a side effect of the two worlds colliding. From her perspective, I mean, who are these people?
She has no idea.
And it's a great reminder that she's just not part of this world.
Yeah. And
this adds to the unsettling feeling, which permeates throughout the entire episode.
I would say we haven't seen her do much. We've seen a lot of characters. There's at least two characters in this episode that have to do something that feels more in the realm of action, or at least a lot of physical acting. So we have Gus, which we'll talk about later, but then also Kim here, just resisting all these people grabbing her, screaming, "Who are you people?" Like, this is it's not especially violent for this show, but as far as Kim's scenes go, this is kind of one of the most violent sequences we've seen from her. And I would just say Ray Seahorn's acting, off the charts. This is
because it's a weird moment to play.
Stuff.
Never held a gun before. She has to be uncertain. She doesn't want to shoot somebody, but at the same time, she looked ready to do it. It's a complicated emotion to play.
Yeah.
But I guess that's the question I have about the scene, and one that I've seen debated. Was she going to pull the trigger if she weren't stopped?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's the way I read it too. It almost wasn't even ambiguous to me.
Yeah.
And I think that's partly because anytime we've seen Kim dedicate herself to something or decide to do something, I mean, she does it.
Yes.
And this is obviously a hard thing to do, but to me it seemed like she was ready to do it.
If she wasn't going to pull the trigger, then she would have spoken to the cops at that red light.
Yeah, I think that's true.
It was again one of those clear. Essentially, it was a black and white moral dilemma, and this isn't something you see in media a lot anymore. Is black and white choices, black and white, not exactly morality. The show is not telling us she should have spoken to the cops,
right?
But it is giving us black and white choices, at least black and white insights into the way a person thinks.
You mean where it's really simplified down to option A, option B?
Yeah,
there's not a range of choices here.
Yeah, this show does not. The show delves into gray areas, maybe on the really abstract sense, but one thing that makes it really interesting and in some ways hyper-realistic is that there's no ambiguous choices. There aren't many opportunities for half measures. Like, she's given this choice. Do you talk to the cops or do you go do it? Once she drives off from the cops and chooses not to, she decided she's going to pull the trigger on whoever's behind that door.
Right. In her mind, if she doesn't do that, Jimmy's dead.
Yeah. And so that's a very refreshing thing, and that's when people talk about how they're not ready for this universe to be finished and they want more. I don't even necessarily need more of this universe. It could be something else. It doesn't have to take place in New Mexico. It doesn't have to take place on this planet.
Right.
But what I want is this sensibility and this style of storytelling.
Yeah, I think when people say they're going to miss this universe, they might even think what they mean is the cartel and these characters, but I think a big part of that is the sensibility you're describing.
Yeah, doesn't even have to be about crime.
Yeah. Mike heads to the underground tunnel to find Gus, and it tells him to hunker down while he heads to the condo with some of his men, where they think that Lalo is holding Jimmy. Meanwhile, at the laundromat, Tyrus leaves to go join Mike, and as Tyrus leaves the laundromat, the security guard who is watching all of the cameras gets up to kind of see Tyrus off. I think maybe he closes the gate too.
And then while he's doing that, Lalo sneaks into the safe house.
Right. So the security guard just misses the opportunity to catch Lalo on camera.
Yeah.
We'll come back to
we're
this.
alluding to something. Yeah,
Right. We'll come back to this moment later.
I mean, it's obvious what we're alluding to, but still.
Meanwhile, back at Gus's house, he asks Kim why Lalo sent her. And she explains that Lalo wanted Jimmy to go, but he convinced him to send her instead. And Gus is surprised by that. He talked Lalo out of it. And this was another one of those moments that, if interpreted in a different way, it can be laugh out loud, like it was at the Tribeca screening. Because we
get it, Gil. You went to the Tribeca. You were specially invited to go to the premiere.
That's right. Peter Gould himself invited me. I'll bring it up every 10 minutes.
You were his date.
That's right, yeah. I look great on the red carpet.
Yeah.
So...
Who are you wearing, Gil?
So there's been a few times in the series where people are impressed or surprised that Jimmy was able to talk somebody into something. Specifically, I'm thinking about when Lalo hears of Jimmy negotiating with Tuco.
It's the most impressive one.
Yeah, nobody reasons with Tuco. So it's funny to think that Gus would be similarly impressed with Jimmy. But that's not what's happening here, or at least it's not the only thing. The important thing is that Gus realizes Lalo didn't care who went, Jimmy or Kim, which means this whole thing is a ruse. Like we alluded to earlier, it's a distraction so Lalo can get to the laundromat.
Yeah.
So Gus he'll get spooked, pull all of his men, and then Lalo can get there. So Gus realizes that, grabs a couple of men, heads to the laundromat. At the laundromat, Gus notices something on the fan. Now, it's very dark. This whole episode is pretty dark, except for the beach scene. Which actually, one thing I wanted to mention about that, just one more thing that makes it stick out so much. I don't know that we've ever seen the beach in Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul. So that sticks out, and the fact that it's such a bright scene and such a dark episode.
I want to Google, how far is Albuquerque from the ocean? Okay. Very, very far. It's at least, it's like 500 miles as the crow flies at least, and with driving, it's probably even more.
What did you say? As the crow flies?
Yeah, have you heard that?
No. That just means a direct...
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were making a weird Game of Thrones reference or something.
Why'd you have to remind me of Game of Thrones?
Although
at least it makes this episode feel even better in comparison.
That's true. But digressing, so there's something on the fan. I can't tell if I think the fan is damaged a little bit. It's bent. Okay. Gus then also turns around and sees one of those big bags swinging. So he knows Lalo is there, but it's
and I'm sure everyone watching wanted the bag to just like fall on the henchman or something, or for Lalo to jump out of it.
Right. You want the bag to just crush all the henchmen. But no, Lalo just steps out. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But Lalo just steps out and shoots all of them and then holds Gus at gunpoint. Meanwhile, at the condo, Mike heads inside, removes Jimmy's gag, but Jimmy's not really very helpful. He has no idea where Lalo went.
Yeah.
And you just get a moment of Mike like, he looks very nervous. Not the Mike we saw in Breaking Bad.
Yeah. I mean, he's been cojones to the wall all season.
Yeah, that's right.
No sleep, constantly dealing with this crap.
And
it's all coming to a head now.
Yeah, exactly. This is a bad day for Mike.
Yeah.
He calls Gus, but Lalo's got Gus on his knees, takes Gus's phone and just throws it away. And then starts filming again. Starts telling Eladio all about the meth lab, and he promises that Gus is going to take them on a little tour before killing him. And so Lalo says, we've got 13 minutes until the bald gringo gets here with the cavalry. So at this point, you see some of the hubris. He doesn't think Gus is a threat at all.
Yeah.
The only threat is the help that's going to arrive in 10 or so minutes. So he insists that Gus give him a tour of the underground lab, persuades him with a shot to the chest. He's got Kevlar, but at that distance,
pain.
That's going to hurt.
Yeah.
And you hear the wheezing from Gus. Gus pushes a button, and one of the big laundry machines.
You know how we did? Sorry to interrupt.
No,
you
it's
know
okay.
how we did the Saul, like the Bagman challenge, where we tried to carry duffel bags full of the weight equivalent of 70. What was it? $7 million.
Right.
The way Saul did through the desert. Should we do a Kevlar challenge?
Yeah, we'll put Kevlar on.
Yeah.
You know, we'll do it in the backyard here.
Yeah.
And we'll just take turns shooting each other with Kevlar. It'll be great.
promote the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure YouTube will have no problem with that. So Gus pushes that button, and a big laundry machine starts to turn over and reveal the secret entrance. And there's a great moment here where Lalo says, I had a bathtub that did that. But credit where credit's due, this is better. And, of course, he's talking about the bathtub we saw.
Yeah.
That brought him from his compound into that escape tunnel. Once they're underground, Lalo films everything. He explains the meth lab to Eladio and then prepares to kill Gus. But Gus says, you can't kill me. Lalo says, why not? And Gus says, your boss is going to need me.
Yeah.
Now, he says, I haven't told that fat pig Eladio what I think of him yet.
He's not that fat.
No, but he gives the vibe of somebody who's like living the life.
He's like a fat cat.
Yeah, people are feeding him grapes probably.
He's reclining, yeah. He's wearing one of those crown of leaves on his head, like, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, that you'd expect. You know, like the king or the prince or whatever in Gladiator.
That's exactly what I'm picturing. Yeah.
So Lalo gives him 1 minute to go on a nacho-style rant.
Mm-hmm.
And Gus says a bunch of mean stuff about Eladio. He ends by saying he'll save Hector for last. Before he dies, Hector will know. And then Gus says, I buried every one of you.
He wasn't wrong.
He wasn't. Yeah. Literally, he's going to bury Lalo by the end of the episode.
True.
And Lalo says, big talk. You done? Gus says, no, not yet. And then so during all this ranting, he's been moving, kind of positioning himself.
Yeah.
And then Gus does a sort of mini split to pull the wires apart.
That must have taken a lot of takes, because it's sort of an awkward thing to do to use your feet to separate two heavy electrical cords. So, like, how do you do that without it looking funny?
Right.
So kudos to Giancarlo Esposito, I guess.
Might have been a stunt double. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But it is funny to imagine when Nacho had to pull off an impressive stunt, dropping the pill bottle into Hector's coat pocket. He practiced it over and over. Could have been nice to see a training montage of Gus practicing that split.
And he's got Victor, like, coaching him along the way.
Yeah.
Come on, you got this.
With the lights out, he runs for the gun that we saw him plant a few episodes earlier. And there's a little bit of a shootout. So after the shootout, it's not clear exactly what happened. It takes a second. But then we see Lalo's dying. Mm-hmm. And in the script, it said he takes one last ugly breath, which the actor, Tony Dalton, he found that pretty funny. This was on the Insider podcast. And he kind of threw it at the writer. He's like, so what is this ugly breath exactly? Yeah. And what they came up with was one last laugh. But it's the laugh. We've seen this sort of thing before, where a villain dies, but first he kind of laughs.
Yeah.
But I feel like we've never done it quite this well, with just the right amount of blood, the right amount of wheezing, and it felt like a difficult and disgusting final laugh.
Yeah. Ugly.
It was kind of his equivalent to Gus adjusting his tie before falling dead in Face Off.
Definitely. So
I mentioned earlier, right? We said we'll come back to it. The security guard footage.
Yes.
And in this moment here, I think have some mixed feelings about how this all went down. We talked about it a little bit on the Instant Take. I alluded to earlier there was not from a lot of people, but there was backlash from some people.
The vocal minority, many of whom were probably Saulcast. When there's a big episode, the Instant Take gets a lot of new people who are just searching YouTube for whatever content they can find. So, they're maybe they're not as refined of an audience as those full take listeners.
Yeah, exactly. And we've received some emails. Our good old friend Reginald. I've seen some comments, and I would say literally everyone I've talked to in real life who watches Better Call Saul, people who love the show, similarly had mixed feelings about this.
We're the biggest Better Call Saul fans in the world.
Exactly.
But we're allowed to assess certain things.
Right. And this isn't even me trying to justify it. This is just me saying sometimes you get something wrong. You're like, maybe I just missed something. Yeah. But hearing that told me there's something here that's worth unpacking and trying to understand why exactly we had mixed feelings about it. And I think I've got some thoughts on that. But I'll start.
When the show has me yelling at the TV, oh, come on.
Right.
I got to talk about it.
You can't ignore it. Yeah. Exactly. You don't want us to lie to you.
Keep it real.
Right. Yeah. But first, I want to talk about some stuff I really liked about all this.
Yes.
I already mentioned one thing. Even though we've seen the last laugh thing before, They executed it perfectly.
Very well.
And in a disturbing and memorable way.
The whenever you see blood like on teeth,
Mm-hmm.
something about that image is especially effective and kind of gross.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So visually and tonally, I love this entire sequence. It's not intense in the same way that the beginning of the episode was. So Kim was in danger, and that's very uncomfortable and stressful. Here, there was a feeling of inevitability.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew what was going to happen. I mean, at least I had a very good feeling, or a bad feeling, that there's no chance of Lalo walking out of this alive.
Yeah.
Because we know Gus has to live.
Imagine if he died and it turns out this is like a branching universe situation.
Well, in the Tribeca screening, that was one weird thing. Gus died.
Really?
No, not really. How crazy would that have been?
I mean, it would be...
If they really wanted to avoid spoilers, they just put out a whole decoy
like a fake episode. Yeah.
But the episode visually is very dark. We're dealing with very dark subject matter. And even walking into the meth lab. Well, and even in this visually dark episode, now we're underground. There isn't a shred of natural light. Lalo calls the place a tomb, and you're just trapped in this room with two horrible people where you know nothing good is going to happen down here. And then when they start shooting at each other, I will say on our TV, I think our brightness was turned up way too high. But when I saw it...
at first, my reaction was, this looks weird. It's like, why is it so bright if the lights are completely out?
Right. But if the light is proper, so in the theater, and even when I watched it later on my laptop, it's almost completely dark and only illuminated by the gunshots.
Yeah. In which case, in that context, great scene.
Yeah, I love the way it looked. And Better Call Saul, it kind of reminded me of Breaking Bad, Ozymandias, which I think picked up where the previous episode left off, where there's the gunfire between the Nazis and Hank and Gomez.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the gunfire, and you don't know what happened after. And there's just that, wait, what happened? What happened? You get a similar feeling here. So in terms of the feelings it gave me, there was a lot of good stuff there. Just made me very unsettled and uncomfortable. But, like I said, it's inevitable. We know Gus is going to win. So we're not really interested in what happens here, right? We're more interested in how it happens.
Yeah.
In two respects. One, the logistics. The actual chess moves of what is Gus going to do, what's Lalo going to do in response to that, how are they going to outsmart each other. The logistics of it. The other how is the consequences. What is Lalo going to do before he dies?
Yeah.
And I would say on the consequences front, A+. Right? He was this wrecking force in Jimmy and Kim's life. It was a mechanism for like karmic consequences, shooting Howard in front of them, dragging them both into the cartel world. He is so consequential for both characters, and I think is a large part in what turns Jimmy into the Saul Goodman we know in Breaking Bad.
And he's consequential on so many levels, including something relatively minor compared to all that other stuff, which is Saul might end up realizing that Kim lied about her knowledge of Lalo's existence or continued existence.
Yeah.
I don't know. He might find out. Maybe Mike will say something.
Or he might even notice, Kim, you were a lot less shocked to see that. I mean, maybe it'll be hard to decipher the many emotions going on in that room. But
even something like that, Lalo might end up being a rift in their relationship.
Yeah, 100%. So in terms of the how is Lalo going to go out, the consequences piece of that, A+.
Yes.
But I would say that we saw a lot of those consequences last episode with him killing Howard. Amazing episode, and now 6 weeks have gone by. I've kind of absorbed that. I've grieved for the character. And by this point in the episode, at least personally, I felt Kim is safe.
Yeah.
Once she was with Mike, explained what was going on, I was no longer worried about her. I wasn't really thinking about the consequences of Lalo's character. At this point, I was fully focused on the logistics. How is a showdown going to occur between Gus and Lalo?
Right.
And when you just focus on the logistics piece of it in this episode, I felt a little underwhelmed.
Yeah. And I think there's a bunch of reasons for that. Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. Well, I think I was going to talk about the camera moment.
Yes. Well, we're already talking about the scene in the lab itself, so I just want to say a couple things about that.
Sure, go ahead.
again, perfectly well executed. Like really awesome scene on that front. But we had 6 weeks to think about it.
Right.
And there was basically no doubt in my mind that Lalo would be buried in that lab. I didn't see any other way it could go down, and especially during this episode, once it became clear that they were going to end up in the lab, Gus is going to live, so what's going to happen?
Right.
Either Gus ends up shooting Lalo, or they surprise us by Gus somehow electrocutes him with the wires the way you thought would be cool, or Gus keeps Lalo alive as his own personal coati that he can torture forever.
Right.
Other than that, what can happen? So that is partially a side effect of the 6-week break. I can't totally blame the show for that. I have no idea what goes into those decisions, but I don't know. Maybe they had some decisions over the timing of it. I think without all that time to think, you could make this into, and I proposed this recently, Bill, you can make this into 1-2 hour thrill ride, combine it with the episode that came before. So rather than having a break, you actually don't have any time to think about it. And you go right from Howard's death to seeing the beach.
Right.
They faked his suicide. Because again, that was also, all right, it's not the job of the show to surprise us. Surprise should be done for a reason. It shouldn't just be it shouldn't just be done because you can. So I'm not saying that's a criticism in and of itself. But it borders sometimes on feeling uncreative.
Right.
And that's not necessarily the show's fault, but it can just feel that way if I've already created it in my head and now I'm just seeing it play out.
Yeah.
Don't give me that time to breathe. Put it all together and let me just ride the roller coaster.
Right. Now, I hate to undercut that by saying this, which is we can't really hold that 6-week break against them.
No.
Because, and I think you even know that.
It's Bob Odenkirk's fault. No, totally kidding.
Yeah, well, there were many things that contributed to this break. Part of it was, and they've talked about this was the episode where Bob Odenkirk had his heart attack. On top of that, there was COVID. There was a lot of things that delayed this, and it would have been great if this episode came right after the previous one.
Yeah.
I just think it couldn't happen.
Right.
But even removing that, I still think there's something here which I think explains why it rubbed you the wrong way.
Okay.
Which is that Gus manages to get one over on Lalo by stalling with a long rant.
Yeah.
He just talks and talks. Why doesn't Lalo just shoot him?
Yes.
And there is a logical explanation on both sides. Gus needs to stall so he can get in position to shut off the lights. So he does that by ranting about Eladio. And maybe he even got the idea from seeing Nacho do exactly that.
Yeah.
Because it actually felt a little bit like a repeat of that story beat. But it would be very logical where he saw, hey, Nacho did this. It seemed to work pretty well. I'm going to do the same thing now. Why would Lalo sit there and let him rant? They actually talked about this on the Insider podcast. Again, Kelly Dixon asked them, she's like, why doesn't he just shoot him?
Well, here's one reason. Lalo loves a good roast.
Right.
Yeah.
So he was just enjoying it. He was just finding all of Gus's colorful insults entertaining.
Like after he called him a fat pig, he laughed, but he was like, ooh, a little harsh on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, he was throwing in his little commentary on the side. So that's reason number one. Reason number two is that Gus is an earner. That's the whole problem here. They can't just kill Gus.
And earner with a capital EARNER. Like, it's easy to maybe overlook this, but we're talking presumably hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah, right. I remember that big,
if not many tens of millions.
Yeah, that big stack of money that Gus brought in comparison to the tiny rolls of cash that Hector brought in. Eladio loves Gus because he brings in money.
Eladio, I think, is sexually attracted to money. Or at least like the things it buys. It really looks that way.
He very well could be.
Right. So we're talking about, first of all, Eladio is on drugs. He is obsessed with wealth and the symbols of wealth.
You have to bring him gifts whenever you meet him.
Yeah. So it actually is logical to me that you would need to give him extremely good reasons to kill off an earner. I think even if you could prove Gus was up to these kinds of shenanigans, but gave assurance that he would never do it again, and that I'll just keep earning, and maybe he would be doing it under duress, under a threat. I think Eladio would entertain that idea because he loves money so much.
Or maybe even just showing the footage of the underground lab, it might just not be convincing enough.
Right.
Because you got to take Lalo's word. What you're seeing here is preparation for an underground meth lab.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's purely logical, but Eladio, he still might not go for it.
Right.
But
sorry, I just want to say, before people call me stupid, I think Eladio would probably kill Gus if he found out any of this.
Right.
But I do think you need to give him a very strong reason.
Yeah, no, your point stands. Yeah. You need something. If Lalo's going to kill Gus, he needs something ironclad. And so when he sees Gus going on this rant, calling Eladio all these names, admitting to building an underground meth lab, it's great to have that on camera.
Mm-hmm.
So Lalo lets him talk. But that's very logical. Yeah. But in that moment, watching it, I couldn't stop thinking, this is obviously a stalling tactic.
Yeah.
And the way I understand the Lalo character, he should have understood that. Mm-hmm. Or even if he wasn't sure, if he sees Gus moving suspiciously, Gus, stay there, don't move.
Right.
It didn't feel in character for me with Gus, with Lalo. And Gus even says, when he asks, are you done? Gus says, no. I'm going to bury all of you. Gus says with confidence, I am going to kill you right now. Not in those words, but he says, I'm going to kill you. Mm-hmm. And still, he stands there. Yeah. And then, so the argument for why Lalo would have allowed this to happen is overconfidence. Mm-hmm. And we have seen Lalo have overconfidence. He walked right into Casper's house, right?
Yeah. And
has no worries about Casper's going to be armed or any of that. The thing is, it's always worked out almost perfectly for Lalo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's never really come off as
he's like this force of nature that can just go and do whatever he wants. He's like unstuck. He's like unplugged from the matrix of like physical reality. He can just come and go as he pleases and do what he wants without consequence.
And I think the way that I always justified that is not that he has a supernatural power, but that he knew which battles he would win.
Yeah.
He was confident because he calculated this is a situation where I can be confident.
Right.
So it seemed to me that this just felt like an incorrect calculation.
Yeah, maybe you
such
just
a degree,
thought, okay, I mean, first of all, it's helpful to get more footage of Gus talking, especially Eladio. Maybe he's not only does he love wealth, but maybe he's a little bit of a narcissist. So if you hear this guy talking so much smack about you, that's going to help your case if you're Lalo.
Right.
Furthermore, maybe Lalo thinks, let him talk. It's entertaining. It's entertaining to watch this guy squirm because I don't believe he's going to get out of it. So no harm. Let him keep going. Now, I feel differently. I'm making reasons for this.
Right.
But in my soul, I don't like it.
Right, because there's two factors. There's Lalo's overconfidence and Lalo's I'm combining the two names.
Yeah.
There's overconfidence on one side. On the other side is Lalo's instinct and ability to understand that Gus is up to something and has an ace up his sleeve. Yeah. So the question is, do you believe the overconfidence is enough to outweigh that instinct? And I guess for me, just up to this point, Lalo's been established as a character where I don't buy the balance that they showed us. I don't believe that his overconfidence would have overpowered that instinct. Yeah. And so rubs me the wrong way a little bit. And I will also say this, the talking to stall a person so you can kill them tactic is a trope. It's a very recognizable cliche that we see in bad action movies.
Yeah.
So even if you pull it off masterfully, there's no way to not see it.
Right, and maybe it's not their fault that this has been done by those other works.
Mm-hmm.
But it has been. That's the world we live in now.
Right.
And they know this is the association it's going to conjure.
Yeah, and it could be that because of that, we put more scrutiny on it. But all those factors give me that feeling of... I have mixed feelings about how this went down. On the logistics front, like we said 5 times, on the consequences front and Lalo's long-term impact on the show, A+, which I do think is the more important aspect.
Right. It didn't have to... There are other ways Gus could have ended this and defeated Lalo that did not involve this cliche. Mm-hmm. In the end, it's not... I don't know, you could say it's not important, right?
Right.
But they still did it, and it still bothered me. And I'm so... This is the best show on television. Mm-hmm. One of the best shows ever made. So it's not that my standard is that. Well, I do have a really high standard, but it's more my expectation has been set so high that it feels like a letdown. This feels like something out of a show that I wouldn't watch.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But one episode. So I have mixed feelings about this episode. I don't think that's going to change. But 5 episodes to go, and I'm still extremely excited for those. Yeah. And I have no doubt they're going to be awesome episodes.
Agreed. I'm still very. This doesn't shake my confidence in the show. In the way the show's going to conclude. But it's hard to now look at some of the episodes this season and not think that earlier episodes were better.
Yeah.
Just superior in writing. Everything else was equally well done, if not better. But the thing I love most about this show and this universe is the writing, by a long shot. Mm-hmm. If the production value was half of what it is right now, or even lower, I don't think that would affect my feeling about the show.
Right.
It's the writing is so incredible that for something like this to happen, it gives me agita.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't want to be dramatic, but like this show is it's like my life.
Yeah. Okay. So there was one other moment that might fit into the category of nitpick.
Yeah.
And at this point, I almost don't feel like talking about it, so we're gonna keep it really brief.
Yeah. For a show that has just been so good to us on an entertainment level, on an intellectual level. It's something I love so much. I don't want to dwell too much on the negative, and there's a preparation that goes into these episodes of Saulcast as much as it doesn't always appear that way. Just kidding. I think
feel like you dig at me right there.
No. I was just looking to see your reaction. I didn't want to make you mad or anything.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Anywho, the point is, off camera, we've talked a lot about this next thing and have thought a lot about it because we're very neurotic.
Right.
And there's also been like a lot of drama in the YouTube comments. Drama's too strong a word, but disagreements and healthy debate. So we're not going to spend too much time on this.
Show me that healthy debate. I'd love to see that.
I'm being generous. I'm being very generous.
All right. Anyway, okay. So basically, the moment where Lalo sneaks past the security guard and he gets past the guard, basically the guard misses seeing Lalo on camera by about 1.5 seconds.
Yes.
Now, basically, the argument that says that's okay is that Lalo's been casing the place. He saw the guard. He knew how much time he had to get past. For me, watching it, it seems like there'd be too much variability. I mean, he missed it by literally about 1.5 seconds. So that doesn't sit totally right with me. But I think more than that. And again, it's a little bit ambiguous, so it could go one way or the other.
Was he running really fast to try
No, not at all.
So,
I mean, in that one moment he was, but the guy goes to kind of see Tyrus out, and Lalo kind of strolls out of his car.
Right.
Once he actually goes through the vent, he's moving pretty.
If he's just strolling out of his car, I mean, so he's saying I know it's exactly 8:14 p.m. Therefore, I know that I have. Like he's not. First of all, he's not doing the calculations in his head.
Right, but I'm just going to cut you off right there. If he sees the guy walking back,
okay, he can time it from there.
Maybe he can time it.
Sure, but in that case, why would you only leave 1.5 seconds? If you're so familiar with this schedule, why would you only leave 1.5 seconds of clearance for yourself?
Right. But even saying that, okay, if that works, I think what makes it not sit right with me is that I don't like the fact that they would have any process which allows for that station to be unmanned.
Yes.
Nobody should ever leave that desk without somebody already being there to take over for them immediately.
A clear change of shift, a change of duty. This is how things are done in many other fields, like such as security. Right. And if you are going to do that, it's all DVR. Like, just, okay, if you're ever away, rewind, see what you missed, and then fast forward through it so you can catch up to the live feed. Right. I do it when I'm watching live stream all the time on YouTube. So I just don't believe, just like you, I don't believe Gus would allow a process that doesn't have 24/7 eyes every second.
Right. And then, you know what you can say to that is that they're
stretched thin.
They're stretched thin, etc. So you can
then rewind and fast forward.
Right. See, you can. The guy doesn't know what he's doing. He's not up to Puerto Hermano standards. You can
maybe.
You can come up with reasons to explain it. Sure.
But one of the things I love about this show and about Breaking Bad is rather than contrasting with something like Walking Dead, which happens to be on AMC as well. This fly's going nuts around my head.
That's
Okay.
the resurrected Lalo.
Yeah,
right there.
he's pissed about my criticism here. So, Walking Dead was largely driven by characters making mistakes and making poor decisions.
Right.
This show is full of competent people, and that's one of the things I enjoy about it. That's one of the best things about Mike, is when you're watching him clean up a place or anything. You're watching a smart, competent person do an effective job. This didn't meet that standard. This wasn't up to Pollos Hermanos standards.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, again, you can logic it out. You can come up with reasons, but nothing will replace the fact that I felt that way when I watched it. And I almost didn't even want to bring this up, but like I said before, I've talked to so many people who, without prompting, say, like, what was with that moment? They really didn't like it. So I wanted to understand it.
Mm-hmm.
I think I now understand it. I don't like it, but I see why people are mixed on it. Okay. From this point forward, I love everything about the episode.
Yes, absolutely.
Gus is lying on the ground bleeding,
Mm-hmm.
so he got hit in that shootout. Cut to Lyle strolling into Los Pollos Hermanos early morning.
Pollos Hermanos.
Pollos Hermanos. Delicious
chicken, something fried. What is it?
delicious chicken grilled and fried. Pollos Hermanos. Pollos Hermanos. It will leave you satisfied. So this was another one of those moments where a lot of the side characters are kind of getting one last great scene this season. You think about the film crew, Bill Oakley, though he had a chance to reprise his role on Saulcast trivia night earlier this week. And I'll put in a few clips from that, so stick around. You'll get to see Bill. So this was another one of those great shining moments. He gets a call from Gus telling him that he won't be in all week. Got called out of town for a family emergency. In reality, he's having his wounds nursed, and his doctor's on the way.
Thankfully for Gus, the bullet wound seemed to have a clear entry and exit, and it kind of went through his love handle.
Yeah, that's right.
So, nothing too bad, but I'm sure he was in immense pain. Probably the worst pain was from broken ribs, probably.
From the first shot, right?
Kevlar. Multiple.
Now, my favorite line here is when Gus says to Lyle, so serious, he goes, "This will require you to both open and close today and tomorrow." But Lyle is up to the challenge. So Mike says to Gus, you happy with the way things went down tonight? Because I'm not. How'd you know Lola would be at the laundry? Gus says, I didn't. And Mike says, well, the next time you get a wild hair to play detective, tell me. This could have gone down a whole lot different. And Gus says, kind of throws it back at him. It could have.
Yeah.
And how did you read that? It could have.
I read it as Gus's intention was basically saying, Mike, if you were better at this, this would have all gone differently.
Right. And I think it was sort of a...
Two ways. Both that and I won. I could have lost, but I won.
Right.
That's another...
It didn't go down that other way.
Yeah.
And to some extent, I had to take matters into my own hand.
Yeah.
And we talked about this on the Pete Pepper stream last night, but there is a question of how does Mike get from here to the standing he's in during Breaking Bad, where he seems to be well-respected in Gus's organization. And I think part of the answer to that is Gus learned how to use Mike. And I think we sort of agreed on this.
Yeah.
Mike lost a chess match here. But you better believe if it was a checkers match, he would have won.
Right.
Yeah, he's not the master strategist the way Gus is.
Right. Mike executes, both literally and figuratively.
Right.
He's also very smart, and he can plan, and he can play chess to an extent. But we've learned over the course of the last two seasons, Lalo is on another level. He's up there with this is the order of chess players in this universe, from best to third best. Walter White, Lyle, Walter White, Gus, and Lalo.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, that actually makes sense. Gus kills Lalo, and then Walt kills.
That's right.
Gus.
Yeah.
Who killed Walt? Oh, Walt killed Walt.
Walt killed Walt.
Yeah, that makes sense.
He's the only one who could.
So
it's like the joke, say what you will about Hitler, but he did kill Hitler.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
So at the condo, the sun's starting to come up. Jimmy and Kim finally reunite. They hug each other while Mike and his men stuff Howard's corpse into the fridge and
Oh my God.
replace it with a new one. Yeah. Better Call Saul does a great job of showing you horribly disturbing things in a very matter-of-fact way.
Yeah.
Which somehow, by not dwelling on those things and just, like I said, matter-of-fact showing them, makes them more horrifying.
It makes it kind of worse because they're not even really giving it the room to breathe or like the
it's
room
not
to
presented.
They're not showing like when you see the fridge, they're not putting music that's like, or something.
Exactly. There's nothing cinematic being done to accentuate.
Yeah, it's just daily life.
Exactly. Yeah. Jimmy's freaking out. He keeps saying, Lalo's coming back. He said he's coming back. Mike tries to calm him down and says he is not coming back. Felt a little bit like they really didn't want Mike to say unequivocally that Lalo's dead.
Lalo is dead.
Right, Mike.
Done. Just say it.
But we know Mike doesn't do that.
Yeah.
Like when he's dealing with Werner, he can't say Gus is going to kill you. Yeah. He just says he's a very serious man. So, but this helps make the line in Breaking Bad work, where Jimmy still thinks he might be out there, and I don't think there's anything Mike could say. To make Jimmy truly believe.
Unless you bring him evidence, which that'd be a terrible idea, is to keep evidence of that. He's not going to believe it because Lalo is too dangerous. Yeah, Lalo will haunt him for the rest of his days, I think. Mike tells Jimmy and Kim that he's going to set up Howard's death to look like a suicide. He's going to put cocaine in the car, and he says, that's the story you were setting up for this guy, yeah? And I think you mentioned that you loved the inclusion of that line. Yes. Yeah, I really love that. That's one of my favorite lines this episode because he's basically saying, you're part of this. Right? Oh, you don't like that maybe Howard's going to die with his reputation completely tarnished? Or maybe you feel like that's even Howard, who you hate, maybe he doesn't deserve that cruel of a fate. Well, I mean, this is what you were doing. This is the direction you pushed the narrative in, and we're going to complete it. And he even says, you keep telling the lie you've been telling. Yeah. So it doesn't even feel like Mike is purposefully trying to twist a knife, but every word it's logic. It is. What he's saying is logical, and he has to say it, but it is twisting that knife. Yeah, and this is what I love about the show is this sort of justice or they kind of teach you that in this universe we just talked about this earlier. There's very few kind of moral gray areas. If you make the decision we're going to ruin Howard's life, we're going to ruin his reputation, you don't get to decide when that ends. Eventually the lie outgrows you and takes on a life of its own. Bad choice road doesn't allow U-turns. There's a lot of people out there listening who are telling lies and like, wait a minute, what? And I just can't turn this around now. We're making a lot of people, turning a lot of people into better people right now. He tells them the moment you hear about Howard's death, you call the cops. People would have noticed his car there all night, so the cops are going to want to hear from you. Right. So exactly. So they're concerned. They're like, they have information to add. Yeah, exactly. Now they both have to go to work, act like everything is normal, go about your day, normal, same as ever. No staring into space, nothing out of the ordinary. You cover. No staring into space. If this was Walter White getting that instruction, it would be tough because he did that a lot. That's true. Yeah. It's in the first episode. Staring at the mustard. That's right, yeah, when he first gets the diagnosis. Yeah. Love this scene. We already talked about a lot of the reasons why we love it, but one of the things I'll add is when he says, you cover. To me, that sounds like you need to cover tomorrow, and Jimmy will continue to do that for years. And that's the Saul Goodman persona. Right. The lie he has to tell now is not just the lie of Howard's demise. It's the lie of who he is. Right. He buries all that trauma under the Saul Goodman persona, under the lavish home, under the Corvette, under those snide remarks, those rude remarks he made to Francesca. Yeah. All of that is the cover, I think anyway. We'll see what happens in the next few episodes. But I thought this is a brilliant kind of handoff to whatever's coming next. It's a really cruel fate. So he, in the Insider podcast, I believe, was it Vince Gilligan who said that what Saul Goodman wants is love. Right. That was Peter Gould said that in Talking Saul. Okay. So Saul Goodman is kind of an unlovable person. I love him as an outside viewer and from an entertainment perspective and from the perspective of intellectual interest.
Mm-hmm.
But he is a criminal lawyer. He's a scumbag. He's forced into this position where
Okay, Chuck.
exactly he became he became what Chuck perceived him to be, something rotten.
Right.
Saul didn't become that. He's forced to be that now. And that's kind of like a form of like cosmic punishment.
Yeah. I think, again, we don't know what we're going to see the next few episodes, but that is the vibe I got from essentially this one line from Mike. And I thought, I mean, obviously a lot of work's been done up to this point to establish all that, but this kind of pulled it together for me in a great way, in a way that gets me very excited for the next 5 episodes.
Yeah.
And I love the fact, I keep saying this, I love the fact that even though these crazy things have happened, these things with monumental consequences for Jimmy and Kim, we now get to live with those things and see how...
5 episodes is a lot of time.
Exactly.
They're going to take their time really digging into this, which I'm very excited about.
That's like 2 movies worth.
Yeah. That actually makes it sound like less now. And just one more thing on the idea of what Saul Goodman wants being... what he wants is love. I don't think this show tends to give people what they want.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, even if we never saw Breaking Bad, Breaking Bad is this big clue that, okay, where's Kim? We never see her, so there's a good chance they don't end up together for one reason or another. Even if you didn't know that, if all you knew is that Saul Goodman is a man who wants to be loved, that's a good sign that he's not going to get to hold on to Kim. I'm not sure. We don't know exactly why yet, but every episode brings us closer and closer to that.
Yeah. So, very excited to see where things go next. But we're not quite done with the episode yet. Back at the Super Lab, they dig up some concrete, throw Lalo's body in. Before they throw Howard's body in, too, Mike stops them to remove the shoes, wallet, and ring to set up the suicide. And once the camera focuses on Howard's body, we get more of Porter's great score. There is this very melancholy cello score, which apparently was written for the beach scene, which I thought it was a good idea. They decided to keep that without score other than what you hear from Howard's car. That was a great choice. And I thought it worked so well here. Such a sad, and you said earlier, feels unjust. I mean, it's impossible not to think of that word again when Howard is forced to share a grave with this horrible person, the man who killed him. Yeah. So it's an awful image to see at the end of this episode, and the music just makes you hear it all the more. And you got to love Mike, before they throw Howard's body in, he says, easy. And when they're both in the grave, you see that sad look in Mike's eyes, which to me says another civilian casualty, one that maybe Mike could have prevented if he did a better job anticipating Lalo's movements. Then they fill the grave, and that's the end of the episode.
I don't know how Mike can handle this anymore. Like, how did he make it all the way into Breaking Bad without snapping? How soul-crushing every one of these deaths has to be for him as someone who actually believes in justice, believes in the division between the criminals and the game and those who are out of the game.
Right.
Like, how does he survive that long? I think what it has to be is, for part of it is desensitization, and I also think by the time he's in Breaking Bad, he has to let go of caring about it. I don't see any other way.
Right, to a certain extent, but he also, I think, just says to himself, like, I will do what needs to be done, that the no more half measures, and part of that is because he doesn't want this sort of thing to happen again. But he definitely needs, I think desensitization is a big part of it. He's just seen so much crap,
right?
Poor Mike. So, yeah. So at the end of the episode, I think to wrap it up, aside from, one or two things we pointed out that we didn't love, more than happy with everything.
I have a couple more just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I was about to just say, you know what, you're off the podcast. I'm replacing you with Lyle.
That'd probably be better.
So I feel very excited for next week's episode. It feels like we closed the book on one chapter. It's been all about Howard and Lalo this season. That's closed out now. So for the first time in season 6, I truly do not have any idea what happens next.
It really feels to me like I mentioned that there's sort of a clean slate now. I mentioned that on the Instant Take. There was one commenter in the chat who said, well, it's not really a clean slate because there's going to be all this fallout from all these different things. True. Absolutely true. What I mean by clean slate is the chess game, the cat and mouse that was happening for over a season, like almost 2 seasons now. It's concluded.
Yeah, exactly.
Howard is gone. Nacho is gone. This show is about Saul Goodman and Kim Wexler and who they are, what happens to their characters and their identities and their relationship. That's it. Like, that's the rest of the show. And I'm so excited because to me, that was that's like one of the strongest motivators for me to keep to be interested in this.
Yeah.
And so when I say clean slate, that's not exactly the right word. What I mean is like the table, all the little games of chess that were going on are finished. Now the table is set.
The chess slate has been cleared.
Okay, so if this is like a World Series, okay?
Yeah.
It's finally like 3-3, and the next game is the finisher. Like we're there. Like we're gonna dig into the meat of the core of this series.
Yeah, 100%. And could not be more excited.
Yeah.
I want to say we're rapidly approaching the Breaking Bad timeline. I know we're 4 years out from it. So what I really mean is that we are getting to what feels like the end of the pre-Breaking Bad arc.
Right.
I think at a certain point we hit a kind of status quo where there's nothing else to say about Jimmy until you get to Breaking Bad and or Gene.
Yeah.
Maybe there's one more episode of kind of fallout and cleanup from this. But it feels like we're getting to that point where, I don't know, Walter, Jesse might need to show up. So I'm pretty excited. I'm also curious about Mike. How much more Mike do we need to see? Because I've kind of felt pretty satisfied with his arc since last season. Since last season, I haven't really felt like I need to see more of him just logistically. He's part of the plot. It wouldn't make sense not to see him.
Well, okay, we might see him logistically in the sense of learning. Okay, confrontation. Why weren't you watching us?
Right.
Or him saying something, not even because he cares about the relationship, but for one reason or another, it just comes up that Kim already knew Lalo was alive.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are logistical reasons, but then you're gonna speak more about
just character.
Abstract. Yeah.
Do we need to see anything else happen? Do we need to see any more character development from him? I'm not sure. I feel like I understand how Mike became the Mike we met in Breaking Bad. I don't know that I need to see more, but I'm curious if they surprise us and show us something.
I think what we saw in this episode was okay. So character development wise, the Mike being forced to kill Werner, that was a huge moment for him. Right. I don't think we're gonna get something of that magnitude anymore. But I also think that what we saw in this episode with him just kind of saying like, "Hey, take it easy" with Howard and stuff like that, and confronting. I think we need one more thing.
Okay.
One more thing to just fill in the gaps a little bit between Better Call Saul and Mike from Breaking Bad.
Right.
Just a tad bit more.
Okay. If you're curious if there is going to be more, Jonathan Banks did an interview yesterday where he revealed... No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I don't even know why I went for that now. I don't want to rip that wound open. Okay, so I think we could wrap it up there. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more. If you don't like to see us and would rather just listen to us, you can subscribe to Saulcast on any podcast app. And I'm sorry, I have to ask, what is going on here?
I want it to look like we're in front of a fireplace.
Okay. I was like, what is he doing? With that, I'm Gil.
I'm Adam.
And this is Saulcast.
Okay, if I did my job right, for those on YouTube, it'll now look like we're huddled in front of a fireplace.
And kind of sound like it too.
Come closer.
Okay. So, I think as I was saying, that's the end of the episode. Thank you for watching and or listening. We got the dog in the background.
Never have we been more distracted.
There you go. All right, let's wrap it up there. You know what? Let's roll the clips. So, like I mentioned on Saulcast.
Did you definitely want to do that?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, Saulcast Trivia Night. You know, actually, let me say this, okay? Saulcast Trivia Night, Peter Dyseth, the actor who plays Bill Oakley, he showed up, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
He was in character and did some interstitials. So I'll put a link in the description. You can go to the Trivia Night, and I put chapter markers, so you can just skip ahead to those points. It's just really cool, a really nice little thing that I think you'll enjoy. See you next time.